Hello, welcome back to JM Football. These are your Week 14 NFL Power Rankings. My name is Justin Penik. Dalton Feely is always alongside me for the ride. I just took a Chris Rose line. Producer Mikey along for the ride. Dalton, we're going to start off with Caleb-Williams-Ville. We're going to rip through, I believe, 3 tiers. Caleb-Williams-Ville, thank you, next, and Mid-Megh-Mughh before we talk about teams, because we're approaching the end-ish of the season, and I want to talk about some playoff teams, some teams that are on the edge, and also the top teams in Lombardi Land. A lot of things to talk about. So we'll rip through these 3 tiers. Caleb-Williams-Ville, we have the Carolina Panthers 32, Patriots at 31, the Bears at 30, the Commanders at 29. Thank you, next. That's what Zach Wilson just said. To the New York Jets, who are ranked 28th. The Arizona Cardinals are 27th. The New York Giants, who will upset the Green Bay Packers on Monday Night Football next week, are at 26. The Tennessee Titans are at 25. The Raiders are at 24. And then we have Mid-Megh-Mughh. The Bucks. A lot of these teams, I feel, we should rename this tier to Do You Even Exist? Because the Bucks, do they even exist? They're at 23. The Saints are at 22. They've been the team for the last couple years since Drew Brees is retired, being like, do you even exist?
They fit the Mid-Megh-Mughh. They're like, no.
Yeah, like, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, sorry, Saints.
They'll win some games, but Taysom Hill should get more snaps.
Yeah.
The Chargers are at 21. Oh, my God. We've talked enough about the Chargers. They don't even deserve our attention
We don't
anymore.
want to talk about them
The Falcons are also a team that that got our attention earlier in the season. They don't deserve it anymore. They're at 20. The Steelers are at 19. Looking without Kenny Pickett for a little while? Question mark?
Could be Trubisky time.
Could be Trubisky
Still
time.
waiting on more injury news on that to see if it's official that he's going to be out for a little bit. But yeah.
Are they still in it? Like, they're in the playoffs right now.
They're the 5th seed. They're 7-5. They lost to Arizona, which is wild, at home. They always have one of those weird losses during a year. I feel like
and then they'll have a weird win.
They win so many weird games, but then there's one loss. They play a worse team, usually at home, and they lose. That's something I feel. It's not like a fact. That's just a vibe thing.
Their offense has actually looked better
since Matt Canada got fired.
Oh, lo and behold,
crazy.
So, but we'll talk about maybe the Steelers.
Looks a little better. Yeah,
we'll talk about the Steelers maybe a little bit in depth. Maybe they'll win a key game here. But I'm believing
or not.
Or not. Like, I'm not surprised that they lost to the Arizona Cardinals, because I don't view the Steelers as a good team. But I mean, they're the first wild card team.
Yeah,
right now.
There's so many 7-5 teams. You got the Browns, you got the Colts, you got the Texans, and then you got the Broncos, Bengals, and Bills, all 6-6, just lurking there.
Yep.
I don't think the Steelers.
And a lot of them, I think, play each other too. So we'll move to playoffs. Why not? The Cincinnati Bengals with a huge upset win on Monday Night Football. They're at 18. The Seattle Seahawks are at 17. The Vikings are at 16. The Cleveland Browns fall to 15. I think they're the biggest fallers of this week for the
They were 9 last week, yeah.
The Rams are at 14. The Broncos are at 13. Here are the big movers. The Colts at 12. The Packers at 11. And, hey, they're probably not making the playoffs, but these are our power rankings. Suck it. The Bills are still at 10.
They had bye. They had no reason to drop. They didn't play a game. We're not dropping them. We're not dropping them a few spots because they didn't play.
We're keeping the Bills at 10. It's like the college football playoff committee. It's
best talent.
It's, hey, you may not. Florida State may be undefeated.
If we're looking at this, if we're looking at this group of 10 to 18 in the playoffs, why not tier? And you're putting the Bills against any of these teams, I think I'm taking the Bills.
I'm gonna defend the Bills being here. If the Bills were to play, this is how I've been phrasing it to myself recently. If the Bills play the Packers and the Colts and the Broncos tomorrow, well, I mean, the Broncos would beat them. Let's just use Packers and Colts. If the Bills play the Packers and Colts tomorrow, who is Vegas putting as a favorite?
The Bills.
Correct. And who are you going to pick to win that game?
They would pick the Bills.
Who are you going to pick to win that game?
Bills against Packers and Colts against the Bills. No, I'm just kidding. Bills. I would take the Bills.
Right. So that's our reasoning for having the Bills at 10. And if they continue to lose games, then maybe they'll fall. But they're still a really good offense. Anyway, Bengals at 18. They had I'll call it a good win. It was a good win.
Great win.
I still get very frustrated with the Jacksonville Jaguars because it's a team that I want to believe in, and it's like, oh, but their defense is carrying them and playing good. But I didn't think it was I'm not looking at Zach Taylor's offensive game planning, man, going, wow, he utilized all 3 levels of the field. He did at certain times, and quarterback and that offense made the plays when they needed to make them. But still, if you look at the overall passing chart, it's like, kind of an average depth of target like 4.5 yards, and there was one throw of over 20 yards. I'm not really looking at this being like, wow, Zach Taylor master plan. It's another game where I'm like frustrated with the Jaguars, but neither here nor there. The Bengals do what they have to do. They get a victory, and they're still in it.
Give some love to Jake Browning. I mean, what a freaking game, man. He throws for 86.5% completion percentage, which is unheard of in this day and age.
Right.
Throws for 354 yards, 1 touchdown. He looked outstanding. I believe he ran for a touchdown, too.
Yeah, CPOE was in the teens, I believe, which is really like, that's like in the 90th plus percentile. If you have it's that high.
This was his second career start. Last week versus Pittsburgh, he struggled a little bit, had a couple, got sacked quite often, had a couple turnovers. This week, he played balls to the wall, fantastic. Yeah. And granted, Trevor Lawrence gets hurt in this game, and that's a big impact on the result where Cincinnati wins this game in overtime. But this game was back and forth the whole way prior to Trevor Lawrence having that ankle injury.
Trevor Lawrence has been playing really
well.
He's been playing really good football, and that's why it's a shame to see him go down. Because he's a good player, and he's I would say this past month he's been playing like the Trevor Lawrence that we expect him to play like.
And what's crazy is that we talked about it last week where their O-line had been playing relatively well, and then Cam Robinson gets hurt in that Houston game in the first quarter, shifts Walker Little to left tackle from left guard. Ezra Cleveland comes into left guard. And then Walker Little playing a position who he had been familiar in college at Stanford and then getting some reps now back at Jacksonville. He trips on Lawrence's ankle, steps on Lawrence's ankle, and that sets up that injury where you have C.J. Beathard come in. We don't know the severity of Lawrence's ankle injury yet. This could be a couple weeks. This could be the rest of the regular season.
He acted like it was the rest of the regular season.
I'm happy in terms of the news that has come out so far at the point of recording. It doesn't sound like it's going to be out for the year,
right?
Which is great news for Jacksonville. But they're 8-4. Houston is 7-5. Indy is 7-5. That is something to watch. AFC South is still open, especially if Lawrence is going to miss weeks.
Yeah.
One shout out too for the Cincinnati. We talked about Jake Browning. That offense did a really good job, especially his second career start. I'm a little worried about that Bengals defense.
They've been like, hey, and this is even unexpected for these two types of defenses. It's been Washington, dead last. And then it's been Cincy and Philly as the three defenses that have been the worst over the last month in the NFL.
And Cincinnati, this year, cumulative, the entire 2023 season, they allowed the most yards per play, which is you're thinking of a Lou Anarumo defense. You're not thinking they're giving up lots of yards per play. And you saw it when Lawrence was playing when he was healthy. And even C.J. Beathard, during that 2-minute drill, he did enough to get them to force overtime and kick the field goal. He looked solid in that time. I don't know if it's going to be that way when he takes over for a full game, reserve or starter. But that said, Cincy's defense, you have guys like Trey Hendrickson, you have Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt, you got DJ Turner, rookie out of Michigan, who's played a really good game last night too. We got to be better defensively.
Yeah, you do have to be better.
I'm a little concerned about that.
They've allowed them. They're tied with Washington for the most 20+ yard passing plays allowed this year.
Explosives kill you, man.
Yeah, and that's really strange to hear that a Lou Anarumo defense is allowing so many 20+ yard plays. Because I was theorizing before we recorded, Dalton. I'm like, all right, well, I'm thinking yards per play. That's a Bengals defense that will allow you to get little chunks, 4, 5, 6, 7 yards, because they ultimately the end goal is limiting the explosive play, but they're not even doing that. At the end of the day, I still trust Lou Anarumo. If this team sneaks into the playoffs, I trust him to come up with the game plan that is going to be playoff ready.
Right.
And that's what this defense and that's what that coach has shown over the last couple of years, is that regardless of how his unit has looked in the regular season, against big-time quarterbacks, he is going to come up with the game plan that's going to come ready to go. But they're not even really that concerned about the postseason right now. Playing in a postseason game, their concern is just getting there.
You got to get there.
You got to get there
Especially
first.
no Joe Burrow now, too, on offense. It's going to be very interesting to see.
Now, the Bengals are playing the Colts next week. So let's actually talk about our Indianapolis Colts that are at 12.
Oh, our Indianapolis Colts. That's right, Justin Penik. I'm a little worried. This game's in Cincinnati. If Jake Browning, I don't want to say if he plays like this, because I think that's a little bit of unrealistic bar to set now at this point, because that was, for any quarterback, 86 completion percentage, 350 yards. 7th time this has happened in NFL history.
Yeah.
Where guys thrown over 350 yards.
You do have to think about it. Look at the passing chart and see how many times he threw to the left side near or at the line of scrimmage. So that's going to be something.
The depth of target was also a big component of this as well.
Yeah, that's going to be something the Colts are going to know that's coming.
We had talked about last week prior to filming. The Colts, they won. They're 6-5 going into this week. That Shane Steichen should be getting more love as Coach of the Year candidate. Because we're talking about a team that's now 7-5, still second in the division over Houston Texans, who they have to play Week 18. Could be flexed if that game's important for Sunday night, Week 18. I don't know. But they're doing it without Their rookie quarterback, Anthony Richardson, a 4th overall pick.
We were
talking about this.
We were talking about this in the office a couple days ago, and I was like, I think Gardner Minshew is like an upgrade over Anthony Richardson. And you were like, no. And then I finally looked at the numbers. I looked at sack rate. I mean, definitely the rushing element of it and the threat, with running the football. Yeah. Anthony Richardson has that. But even like the explosive pass play rate and the overall accuracy and EPA per play, Gardner Minshew and Anthony Richardson were similar in a lot of those kind of stats. And even if Gardner Minshew was better, he's not astronomically better in any of those, even sack rate, not astronomically better in any of those categories. So I do think as Anthony Richardson would have developed this year, I think that offense would have been better. But regardless, Gardner Minshew is doing enough. I would say he's probably playing below your expectations still, right? Or he's playing like you...
About expectations. Okay. I think he's been a little bit more volatile in terms of like turnover-worthy plays. That's something I really look at is like how many mistakes you're making. It might not be capitalized where the team creates a turnover based on your mistake, but you make a mistake. That's something I really like, especially PFF has this data. Gardner Minshew has the 2nd highest turnover-worthy percentage play of any quarterback, qualified quarterback out of 33 quarterbacks in the NFL that have those snaps. That's the same range as Mac Jones, Desmond Ridder, Zach Wilson.
Oh.
Not a great group to be with. Nope. And he's got the 5th lowest big time throws percentage, which is plays 10 plus yards down the field, tight windows, perfectly plays ball. Gardner's played well enough. Like he's made mistakes, but my love for Shane Steichen, no Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor was out. He was sitting out for a little bit. They had to cut Shaq Leonard because he wasn't the all-pro that he once was. Grover Stewart, their best run stopper, who has been fantastic on the interior defensive line. He was suspended for 6 games. Colts defense has been so weird. It is like all or nothing. They have the 2nd most sacks in football, and no one talks about this. No one mentions this because it's Colts defense.
They have a high blitz rate?
No, 2nd lowest blitz rate in the NFL behind the New York Jets. Jets blitz at least it's like 16%.
But all everybody does is talk about that pass rusher and those guys.
It's a 4-man rush. Yeah. It's Kwity Paye. It's DeForest Buckner. Deo. I'm going to say it wrong. Hurricane Deo.
Yeah.
Taquan Lewis here and there. But they gave up the 5th most points per game. They gave up the 7th most yards, but they 4 sacks, and they have 20 takeaways this year, which is tied for 5th in the NFL.
Yeah, creating negative plays is huge, and you don't necessarily want to use that as a clutch. But if that's what your unit's doing, then embrace it, lean into it. So that's awesome. And also, I want to, Chris Ballard deserves a shout out too, where. Hey, it's a guy that should he keep his job? You're changing all these head coaches, can't find a quarterback, but it all starts with the offensive line, and you look at that offensive line and. As of late, obviously Quentin Nelson's a first-round pick back in 2018, but as of late, there hasn't been like high-level draft capital spent on that offensive line yet. You look at Bernard Raymond at left tackle, 3rd-round pick last year.
Central Michigan, yep.
And he's good. He's a good left tackle. And
very serviceable.
And left tackle is the 2nd most important position in the game of football. They have a guard. They have an interior guy that's playing well. Will Fries is playing well. Their right tackle, who even though he's been banged up.
Yeah, so they had Braden Smith banged up. It's been Blake Freeland and him. Ryan Kelly's been out, so Wesley French has come in and played serviceable. And, Ryan Kelly's obviously better. But like you said, this O-line, shockingly, which had been heavily criticized going into the year after taking a big step back the last couple of seasons, back to 2018 form.
But it starts there. It starts with the O-line, and I think without that unit playing so well, they're able to run the ball. It doesn't matter with, Jonathan Taylor or Zach Moss. They're able to run the ball, and they're able to at least keep the quarterback upright at least where the quarterback isn't taking sacks himself and he's responsible for it. I feel like that's such a huge advantage, and that's a big reason why the Colts are where they are right now. Let's talk about the Green Bay Packers. Huge upset win on Sunday Night Football. And honestly, man, I think it kind of starts with just Jordan Love just being better, right?
This looks like 2 different teams. Earlier, the first 8 games of the year, they looked horrendous. And I said to you, I'm like, what are they doing? Is this really Matt LaFleur's team, this offense? And I'm like, I don't know. But Jordan Love over the last 5 games, 3rd highest EPA per dropback. I know you love your EPA. Behind Brock Purdy and Dak Prescott. Great group to be in over the last 5 weeks. They're 4-1 over the last 5 weeks. I'm going to pat myself on the back. I did successfully predict that Sunday night upset versus the Kansas City Chiefs.
Good for you.
So I got to give myself some love there. But it was a nice little revenge game. Remember when Jordan Love, his first career start by any chance?
No.
This was in Kansas City, 2020, his first year, 2020. COVID. Aaron Rodgers gets COVID. Jordan Love steps in Arrowhead versus Kansas City, loses. Comes back, plays him for his 2nd career time. Big Sunday Night Football win.
Yeah, I think Christian Watson he's continuing to unlock what that offense can do.
Yeah.
Now that he's actually out there, he's actually healthy. Struggled with injuries kind of throughout the year, inconsistent play. Jordan Love was inconsistent to start the year too, where his EPA and I gotta like make a video about all this stuff that we say. EPA is expected points added, where basically every single play in the game of football is assigned a point value. A lot of plays are usually under 1 because if you get your 1st and 10 play that gets 7 yards, you're not putting 1 point on the board. You're putting less than that, but your first and 10 play that gains 7 yards, that's a good, positive first down play. Yeah. And even let's take a 3rd and 14 play. A 10-yard gain on 3rd and 14 will get you less of an EPA than a 3rd and 3 play where you get 5 yards. Even though you're gaining 10 yards, EPA will like that play better, that first down conversion versus you not getting a first down. Anyway, so Jordan Love's issue was never really EPA per play. It was overall accuracy, and it was him being accurate with the football, where his CPOE, completion percentage over expected, that's the thing that's been lacking. And another term that you probably don't know what it means, CPOE is basically just an accuracy metric, and that's where Jordan Love has been lacking. But now over the last couple weeks, he's been up there. He's up there with Mahomes. He's up there with Allen. He's up there. He's even better than Lamar in that aspect over the last month. So Jordan Love is up there. He's playing like one of those top QBs over the last month. And I think that's been the main difference. And also Christian Watson unlocking some of those big plays, being a red zone threat, and just being an all-around good target. I think that's what has made the difference over at least the last couple weeks.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the Packers have looked really good. This is this part of the stretch where they've started to figure it out. Christian Watson comes back from, I believe, a hamstring injury, Jordan Love. But all that, when I was watching Sunday Night Football, their first 2 drives, I'm like, this is textbook. Like, this is like a fluid. A.J. Dillon looks solid running the ball for the first time in a few weeks. Like, they've been struggling in that running game.
They're very good in their opening script, I believe.
Yeah.
I believe that's something that they're very, very good at.
They scored touchdowns on 3 of their first 4 drives on Sunday Night Football.
They had 2 punts. Yeah. They punted the ball twice.
I think what's really crazy, we've mentioned with LaFleur and Rodgers, chicken or egg, like, is LaFleur a good head coach without Aaron Rodgers, whatever. They're 16-0. Green Bay's 16-0 in December with Matt LaFleur as head coach.
Well, guess what?
It's the second longest stretch in NFL history. Only the Chargers have a longer stretch where they won 18 games in December straight until that was struck.
Well, guess what? We're gonna move to the playoffs. You better be there, Tier. And I'm gonna say that Matt LaFleur, sorry we have to do this to you. You're gonna be 16-1 in the month of December.
No, they are gonna beat the Giants. They're gonna beat the Bucks. They're gonna beat the Panthers. They might meet Minnesota, and then they play the Bears. The last 5 games of the year, all teams either 500 or worse.
Wink Martindale.
Playoff team, Packers, NFC, watch out.
Wink Martindale going to have him in hell. Playoffs, you better be there. We have the Jaguars at 9. The Texans are at 8. The Lions are at 7. The Dolphins at 6. Hey-oh, there's 5 teams in Lombardi Land now.
Wowzers.
Texans move up to 8.
Yeah, I mean, listen, that was a good game. Denver versus Houston was going to be an interesting one because winner gets to go to 7-5. Loser is 6-6. Really helps Houston there, especially now with the Trevor Lawrence injury, where there's uncertainty. They could sneak up to the AFC South. I did say they were going to win the AFC South a while ago. But anyway, I think the interesting thing here is with this Texans team, we have them 8th. And I don't know if they're really the 8th best team in football.
Yeah.
But that said, with all the quarterback injuries in AFC, like right now, the playoff picture, if I'm reading you quarterback for quarterback, it is Tua, Lamar, Mahomes. Normal. That sounds good, right? And then you got CJ Beathard currently. You have Mitch Trubisky, Joe Flacco, and Gardner Minshew.
Yeah.
The reason why Houston's not even in the playoff picture right now, but we have them ranked so high because their defense between Will Anderson and Derek Stingley, like 2 young guys, both former 3rd overall picks in the back-to-back drafts, have played really well for that defense. CJ Stroud is CJ Stroud, and I think he'll still look really good even without Tank Dell. Nico Collins, Bobby Skinner's probably favorite wide receiver in football. He loves himself some Nico Collins, man. This Texans team, they're not, I guess they're fun, but they're not like star heavy, but they're
not at all.
They are well balanced.
Yeah, I think I made the joke that like their wide receivers is like the island of misfit toys. Like, Tank Dell, rest in peace. Tank Dell, the guy that was fun, but nobody really wanted to draft it just because he's really, really small. Nico Collins, who's been, around for a little bit. Noah Brown, who was with the Dallas Cowboys. Dalton Schultz, also with the Dallas Cowboys. Does he deserve the contract? And then lo and behold, here we are. Here we are with this Houston Texans team. And
Devin Singletary also playing well in the running game.
Yes.
Kind of shocking.
Another Island of Misfit Toys guy. Just going anywhere and being on a couple different teams. So, I love how you mentioned Will Anderson and Derek Stingley. Derek Stingley had 2 interceptions.
Yeah.
And Will Anderson had 2 sacks. I think Will Anderson is now at a point where I think we can comfortably say that he is the favorite to win Defensive Player of the Year. Defensive Rookie of the Year, excuse me. Defensive Rookie of the Year next to Jalen Carter. You said also Devin Witherspoon's up there, but I think they're going to ultimately give it to the guy that I feel like this is just a race to whoever has more sacks. Even though Will Anderson, I think he's played more. He's played like 150 more snaps than Jalen Carter. They rely on him more. I think the snap share is like 60% Jalen Carter and then 76% for Will Anderson. And I think Will Anderson just has better overall like advanced numbers too with like win rate and et cetera, et cetera. So I think Will Anderson's going to get it, and Will Anderson's been really, really impressive his rookie year. So good for him.
I do want to shout out real quick, Jonathan Grenard's having a relatively good season with the Texans. They just got Derek Barnett off of waivers. So this front for the Texans, Willie Collins is there, Sheldon Rankins. Yeah. I'm curious. I wanted to make sure before I said it or after I said it because I didn't want to sound like an idiot. But Jonathan Grenard has 8 sacks this year. 8 sacks. No one, again, like that is a very, very solid year. He's on pace for 10. The Texans' final 5 games of the season, it's pretty light. They have the Jets, they have the Titans twice. I believe they have the Browns, and then they have the Colts. Like, if Lawrence is out for a period of time, that's a team that will win the AFC South.
Wow. So not only gonna looking for a wild card, like we're jumping everybody.
If Lawrence is out, it's 1 game.
Your Colts aren't gonna win the AFC South?
Moving on.
Oh, moving on. Oh, great transition. All right, moving on to Lombardi Land. I think we're going to be talking about 4 of these teams. We have the Chiefs are at 5, the Cowboys at 4, the Ravens at 3, the Eagles at 2, and the 49ers are at 1. Now that I'm looking at this, Dalton, I think a lot of people are going to be mad that we have the Eagles at 2 because their defense has not been very good. I still keep them at 2 because I will still... Like they're the most talented team in the NFL. I do think they're even more talented than the 49ers. But I think a lot of people are going to be like, the Eagles aren't good. They're not playing well, blah, blah, blah. And I get it, I guess.
So I understand it too because, like, listen, this defense is, for the amount of stars they have on this team, you acquire Kevin Byard at the trade deadline. You have this front with Jalen Carter, Fletcher Cox, Josh Sweat. Did I say... I always do this. Hassan Reddick. Yeah. I always forget Hassan Reddick for some reason. I don't know why. Regardless, James Bradbury, Darius Slay, so many guys at all levels on the defense, and they've been bad. The last 5 games, they've allowed 435 yards on total defense per game, average-wise. And this was a big eye-popping stat to me. 3rd down percentage. Last in the NFL. They allow the highest 3rd down percentage, conversion percentage in the NFL. So this Eagles defense, Sean Desai, I believe it's his first year as defensive coordinator, as Jonathan Gannon left to take the Cardinals job. Not the same group. And mind you, I think one thing when we look at defenses, I think we overlook the scheduling aspect of it and your strength of opponents, if you will. Last year, the Eagles had a much easier schedule in terms of the offensive talent they're playing. Yeah. And now the Eagles, like the last 4 or 5 games they've played, have played really good teams. And no wonder they're getting slashed because you're playing these elite offenses in the Buffalo Bills, in the Dallas Cowboys, in the Kansas City Chiefs, or should be elite offenses.
I mean, if they're average, if they're kind of like in an average ranking, I'm like, all right, hey, they're playing a gauntlet of teams.
Yeah.
It's not good. And they got their ass kicked by the 49ers. They got their asses kicked.
That for sure. For sure. But, I mean, like, listen, the last 5 weeks, this is going to be the big test. It's Sunday Night Football. It's Sunday Night Football versus Dallas.
Yeah.
In Dallas. That is like, okay.
It's a big test for both teams.
It's a huge test. Yeah. And it's like one team is trending up and one team is trending down. Then they have Seattle, Giants, Cardinals, Giants. Like, they can still finish this year 14-3.
Yeah.
And be like, and people will still say they're not good and they're 14-3. It's because they haven't been dominant. The Cowboys, the biggest difference between the Cowboys and the Eagles, the Cowboys have won so many games dominantly by 20+ points. And the Eagles haven't. The Eagles have not done that this year. I'm looking at their schedule. They've won by 5. They've won by 6. They've won by 14, by 3, by 9, 14, 7, 5, 4, 3.
College Football Playoff Committee not going to put the Eagles in the playoffs. They're not. I will say, like, Darius Slay and James Bradbury, I know their run defense isn't very good. Their run defense is pretty bad, but their run defense wasn't great last year either.
Depending on Jordan's when
Jordan Davis.
Yeah.
But I mean, they have at least the defensive linemen. I'm not very like ultra familiar with what their linebacker situation looks like. I know they lost a few.
Got Shaq Leonard, baby, legend.
They lost a few in free agency, and I think you're a Colts fan. I don't think we're expecting Shaq Leonard to go in there and save that linebacker room at all.
No.
If you're available at this time of year, you're available for a reason, right? But I mean, good pickup for them. He's certainly going to help.
Yeah.
But James Bradbury and Darius Slay. I mean, this was the best secondary in the NFL last year because he had those two guys just making plays, jumping routes, and locking guys down. And now that hasn't been the case. And you're James Bradbury and Darius Slay, I do view as top corners in the NFL, and I don't care who you're playing. I expect those top corners to play like top corners and not get their asses kicked. You could lose a player here. James Bradbury, I know him with the Giants. He's gonna, he could lose a play here or there, but not get your asses kicked like this and not be the team that's allowed the 10th most explosive pass plays so far this year.
I do want to give some love to the Niners. This was a shellacking. First two drives, it's 3 and out. You're playing in Philly. You're like, okay, are we getting a little bit of a replay of the NFC Championship game from last year where the Eagles handed it to the Niners and Debo had been talking all this trash about Philly and James Bradbury, and first 2 drives, it doesn't look great, and then next 6 drives, touchdown, 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 touchdown. 42 points on the board. They finished the game completely crushing it. Debo has 3 touchdowns. He backs that shit talking. I don't know if I'm allowed to say shit talking.
Oh, you're allowed to say shit talking.
He was shit talking,
talking shit.
But the Niners offense and deep, like Brock Purdy has played so well, I understand people aren't going to want to give him the MVP, but he's played at a level where he's got to be in the mix, like especially since it's a quarterback-driven award. It's Brock Purdy, it's Dak Prescott. Tua's kind of fallen off. It's probably those 2 guys right now, in my opinion. And then defensively, like
Tyreek Hill,
Christian McCaffrey on the offensive side of the ball too, at running back. Defensively for the Niners, like the secondary, Charvarius Ward, most pass breakups in the NFL with 15 this year, has played really well. Ambry Thomas, knowing he's since coming back week 10, has the 8th highest PFF coverage grade. I'm a big PFF coverage grade guy. Sometimes when here and there, I understand some of his issues. I still value their opinion on it. He's 8th out of 115 qualified CBs over the last month. So he's playing really well too. That secondary, they just lost Hufanga on the back end at safety, and they still haven't missed a beat. Yeah. I'm really impressed with this Niners defense led by Steve Wilkes.
Yeah. And here's, going back to the 49ers offense, what really impressed me the most about their offense against the Eagles defense. I mean, we know Kyle Shanahan is a yak king, but also they've done such a great job, John Lynch in that front office too, getting them guys who can get them yak. I mean, we all know Christian McCaffrey's awesome and it can be used as a receiving weapon. Debo Samuel, I'll tell you, I know Trent Williams was gone too. But I think the main difference in Brock Purdy had a very slow couple weeks in the middle of the season, that's when Debo was out. Yeah. And I think since Debo Samuel said, I don't want to be a running back after that insane season that he had for like fantasy football where he was a running back and a receiver, he's like, I want to be paid as a receiver. Stop using me as a running back because my body won't last. Yeah. He hasn't had like those top, like maybe alpha number 1 numbers like that, but you felt, I felt those weeks where he was gone. It's like, I feel like Debo's missing from this offense.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily.
There was something missing.
There was, and it was Debo. It wasn't just Brock being bad. It was really Debo Samuel. So Debo Samuel, yards after the catch over expectation. I think he broke records this past weekend. Yeah, Brandon Ayuk, who when he was drafted out of Arizona State, led the nation that year in screen yards and those manufactured touches, and that's how he was really able to be productive. And he's also turned into a really good route runner himself. George Kittle's a tough son of a bitch too. I mean, they have, and even Juwan Jennings. Juwan Jennings,
the third down king. It's amazing.
Who's also used as he's like a borderline tight end.
Yeah.
He lines up as a receiver, but they trust him enough to block as a tight end, which is such a weapon.
Yeah.
You can run 11 personnel with the confidence that sometimes teams will run with 12 personnel. But you can also throw out of 11 personnel, and you can run out of 11. There's so many different things that Juwan Jennings is such an talked about piece of that offense because they trust him to block, but also he could catch the ball too. And he was seen as the slower possession guy out of Tennessee. And yeah, he's not fast, but You could throw him the ball, and he could I think he broke a couple tackles.
Yeah,
Did he have a touchdown this past week?
He did.
So still, like Jawan Jennings, who's like used as like this blocking receiver, the third receiver that the 49ers have, is still a weapon in the passing game. So it's absolutely awesome what they can do. And they did it against, again, what I think is the most talented team in the NFL. Despite the Eagles not playing well, I still think they're the most talented team in the NFL.
I think the NFC and AFC, when we're looking at it from a whole league perspective, it's very interesting because we viewed the AFC as this top-heavy conference where there are a lot of teams with these elite quarterbacks, and it's like, oh my gosh, who's going to make the playoffs, who's not going to make the playoffs? And the NFC was kind of weak. You know, it was like there's a couple teams, and that was it. The NFC now, like Niners, Eagles, Cowboys.
Yeah.
And I guess Detroit. But
Lions are in there.
Their defense has been...
Yeah.
But let's say those three for now. Like those are the teams, like, they're in the top 5 for a reason. Like these 3 teams have been really good, and they're going to beat up against each other. In the NFC Championship game, between 2 of those 3 teams, more likely than not, it's going to be a bloodbath.
Yeah.
If the Niners play the Eagles again, I don't think it's going to be 42-19. I think it could be a Niners win still. Mm-hmm. I still think they match up better at this current time, but that was like, to me, an outlier game. Philly had not played a game where they got their shit kicked in. And that was the first time since I believe since Nick Sirianni took over that they had that type of game.
Cowboys come out and lose to the Eagles, and the Eagles defense plays well. What are we saying on Monday or Tuesday? Are we saying that Eagles bounce back game? Or are we saying Cowboys, it's the month of December, get ready, hold on? But by the way, I was told our producer Jeff, who's a Cowboy fan, he's like, I don't call you out on a lot of stuff, he said, but you're wrong about the Cowboys' record in the month of December. Stop, it's a thing. The Cowboy, you could tell me all the stats and you could tell me all the records and the stuff that you want. They get worse in the months of December and January. So what are we saying on Tuesday if the Eagles come out and win or even dominate? Let's just say.
I think it depends on how the game is played.
Right.
Like if the Cowboys play a similar game that they did versus Seattle, where it's like 41-35, it's a shootout on both sides. I say I'm worried about that Cowboys defense now because the Eagles offense hasn't really been clicking yet, and they haven't, playing a defense like the Dallas Cowboys caliber, you wouldn't expect someone to put up 41 against them, right? If it's a game like that. If it's a low-scoring game, I feel more confident in Dallas and Philly.
Yeah.
Because I'm worried about Philly's defense, and Cowboys offense hasn't been tested yet against a good defense, or against a defense or a good team, if you will. Philly's defense has been struggling. It's a very intriguing matchup. I'm going to roll with the Eagles, I think. I still need to look at the numbers. I think Brain says Philly's coming off a big loss. Yeah. Dallas is coming off a nice win on Thursday Night Football.
What's the line? I'm going to look on DraftKings right now. You keep going.
So, yeah, I think it's going to be could be a momentum swing. If Dallas wins, their chances of winning the NFC East opens back up. Both teams would be 10-3. I believe at that point, the Philly would still have a better conference record, which would indicate that they would lead the division still, but divisional record would be tied. They'd have the same head-to-head. They would have the same overall record. So it opens the door for Dallas to win the division if they beat Philly Sunday Night Football this week.
Dallas is home. The line is -3.5, so that makes sense.
So Vegas is thinking that Dallas, if it was on a neutral site, it would be a slight favorite at 0.5 point.
Yeah, for Dallas.
For Dallas, yeah. Who are you going with?
I mean, I picked the Philly to cover last week, and they were underdogs. Oh. I'm picking Philly again, even though like everything in my being says go Dallas because they're just so fun and like they're playing really good football, and like even their defense last year just with the pass rushes is more fun than Philly's. But I'm not giving up on Philly yet.
Purdy threw for 314 yards and 4 touchdowns versus Philly. Dak, you want this MVP? Match it or do better.
Yeah, really. Because the run game isn't like Tony Pollard's not gonna carry it.
Yeah. As for the most part.
I think even Dak's averaging like less than 4.5 yards per carry as a ball carrier.
Yeah, and they don't use him as much anymore.
No, for sure. All right, that is your Week 14 power rankings. How do you like that? Like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you agree with, what you disagree with. The Bills are too high. What about the Lions? The Dolphins should be... The
Steelers are so high.
The Dolphins should be back in Lombardi Land. Let us know what you think. Merry Christmas, you filthy animals. We'll see you next week. Peace. Thanks for watching.